Okay, it's 5:32, everyone. Hello, everyone. It's 5:32, and this is the regularly scheduled Environmental Commission meeting. And today is March 10th, 2022. Chair Novi, would you like to start the meeting?
Thank you, Chamomile. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we can do a roll call.
Excellent. Commission Chair Ari Novi.
Here.
Commissioner Katie Kramer.
Present.
Commissioner Carol Parker.
Here.
Commissioner Robert Switzler.
Here.
Commissioner William Morrison.
Present.
And Commissioner Mark O'Connor.
Here.
Let the record show we have 6 members of the Environmental Commission tonight.
All right, quorum. Anybody who would like, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda tonight.
Do we have any oral communications?
We do. We have one.
Okay, please
Tonight we
proceed.
have Peggy Walker, and she will be speaking about AB 1690. Ms. Walker, you have 3 minutes to address the commission. If you could state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Peggy Walker. I came as an environmental advocate, and because I've worked in youth tobacco use prevention for years and years and years, and I wanted to ask your support for the Smoking Waste Prevention Act. It's AB 1690. I hope you're maybe familiar with it. I appeared before the City Council a couple of weeks ago and asked their support, writing letters to our Assembly people and senators, our state legislators, to support this. It is supported by our Tasha Borner Horvath, our very own. And I know that Dr. Novotny is here to give a presentation, so I'm not even going to dare to pretend to be an expert on tobacco waste. I think you probably have an idea of how bad it is. But I will say that this AB 1690 bans single-use cigarette products, cigarettes with plastic filters, which Dr. Novotny tells me is about 99% of all cigarettes. It also bans e-cigarettes and some vape products. Disposable vape products that, although advertised as environmentally friendly, are not, because they have ion batteries that are not disposable and are an environmental hazard. So without going into a lot of detail, I will tell you that not only is it an environmental hazard, it's extremely costly. The city of Los Angeles says it costs them $19 million a year just to clean up cigarette butts. And statewide, it costs about $41 million. So it's very costly. I work with San Diego Alliance for Drug-Free Youth, and to brag a little bit, many years ago, our agency, working with local teenagers, initiated the first smoke-free beaches ordinance in the United States, and Encinitas and others followed afterwards. So this is an issue that we feel very strongly about, and as you may know, many legislators benefit from the tobacco industry, so this is going to take a lot of strong community support. So your letters to our legislators for AB 1690 would be appreciated, and I can hardly wait to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker.
Thank you.
That concludes speakers.
Thanks, Chamomile. So let's move right on to our presentation. Would anybody like to do the honors of introduction?
I'll do it.
This is Dr. Tom Novotny from San Diego State University. I don't have your full title in front of me, but very distinguished professor in health at the university. So thank you very much for being here and having a presentation for us.
Thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thanks very much for inviting me. Come and talk to you a little bit about tobacco product waste. I can't comment too much directly about the bill because I am head of a 501c3 and we don't lobby, we educate, and that's what I'm here to do. And thanks again to Mark. He's been a great ally and colleague, especially with Surfrider and the work that we're doing on some other coalition-based work. So thanks for getting the slides up. And I'll go ahead and give you a little overview of tobacco product waste here, especially in California. So I think you probably know a lot of these data that, cigarette butts are the single most picked up item on the beaches. And that's not just here, that's like throughout the world for the last 30 years. And just to give you an idea of the perspective on that, the beach cleanups, I mean, this is a great thing that is done by the International Coastal Cleanup, and Ocean Conservancy sort of organizes that, but a lot of different voluntary groups are involved. And what they found is about 1 million butts that they pick up, this is throughout the world, right? So think about that over, 30 years, 1 million a year roughly. The number of butts here in California in 1 year times 78,000 is what we're talking about. Times, there's 78,000 butts for that whole 30-year history of butt cleanup that is dumped 1 year here in California. So, it's enormous. And it's about 30% of all the beach litter. And then there are urban litter audits. That is actually when people go out and actually count it all up. And it's about 10 to 20% of all urban litter audits. And this is in 3 or 4 big cities around the country. In California, San Francisco did this about a dozen years ago. We're looking at this by census tract in San Diego, and we'll have a little bit more data specifically on all the different kinds of tobacco product waste, not just butts, in a short time here. It's not a lot of weight because 20 cigarettes filters weigh about 3.4 grams. And this discarded filter is the key issue. It's plastic, it's cellulose acetate, which is a plant-based plastic that is on, again, 99.8% of cigarettes sold here in California, and there's about 12.5 billion that we sell every year. And that weight of that is about 2 million or plus kilograms. So that doesn't include all the other stuff, though, the packaging and in the e-cigarettes. And right there, I don't think do I have a pointer? Is that a pointer? No. That lower right-hand picture is a collection of e-cigarette that is Juul, basically, mostly Juul, pods from schools around the San Francisco Bay Area. And that's interesting because those are considered toxic hazardous waste product by the EPA. Clearly written toxic hazardous waste. And when it gets up to 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds, it has to be handled as such, meaning that, when the teachers and when the students dump it on the school grounds or anywhere, and the teachers pick it up and they confiscate it from the students because they're not supposed to have them, and it gets up to 1 kilogram, then they have to treat it as a hazardous waste disposal problem, training their personnel, storing it, transporting it, and disposing of it, which is a cost. And so, we have to consider that, as a sort of a new and improved issue in terms of tobacco product waste. So anyway, there are a lot of them. And do they hurt people? Does tobacco product waste hurt people? Well, what we do know is that it's common. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of chemicals. There's 7,000 chemicals in tobacco products, and about 50 of those are carcinogens. And have they been ingested by people? Yes, they have. There's been, kids who are indiscriminate eaters have taken them up. Animals, we did a study of poison control centers to collect those data. And yeah, it happens. It's not a huge problem, but it's there. And also, what we do know is in laboratory studies, there's a significant amount of damage that the leachate, that is the sort of tea bag exudate of tobacco product, or cigarette butts especially, gets out into aquatic environments. And what we've seen in the lab is that, and I'll show you some pictures here, it's harmful to fish and lots of other organisms, mussels, filter feeders, worms, microscopic creatures. And it has, in fact, an effect on the microscopic biome. And that's been looked at in the field as well as in the laboratory. It's difficult to do field studies, meaning, you can't just go out and monitor a whole big environment to see what cigarette butts are doing to people or to creatures. But what we have seen in some recent research is that we're identifying tobacco-specific chemicals in natural reserve areas, which should be, free of a lot of contamination. But we've had a research project in 4 different natural reserves that are administered by the UC system. And we're identifying a number of nicotine as well as cotinine, which is a breakdown product from human use, and other chemicals that are specific to tobacco products in these natural reserve areas, one of which is Kendall Frost Reserve in San Diego. The ones that are closest to the urban areas have the biggest impact. It's a public nuisance. And this is another really interesting concept because, public nuisances are litigatable. Whether it's a dog barking too loud or some other sort of public nuisance, oftentimes this becomes a source of regulatory importance. So again, we don't know for sure whether this has impacts on human health. We do know that they can bioaccumulate in some of these again, aquatic organisms through, perhaps up into the food chain. We don't have a lot of evidence on that, but what we do know is that it affects lots and lots of organisms in these laboratory studies, and we can identify the chemicals. It's nicotine, it's cotinine, it's heavy metals, it's all sorts of other somewhat toxic chemicals. And there are costs to this. Aside from the public nuisance issue the previous speaker mentioned, we have done some economic studies. San Francisco had a very carefully done economic study where they actually counted everything and they managed to understand how much time was spent by the waste management people and where it went and all the costs. And it came out to about 20 cents a pack of cigarettes sold in the city of San Francisco. So they added a litter fee to accommodate that, which was a creative idea because it raises the price of tobacco products and that lowers the consumption. But it was supposed to fund the programs of cleanup and enforcement and education and administration. That was a good idea. Unfortunately, Prop 26 was passed. I don't know if you remember this one, but that required jurisdictions to have a 2/3 vote of the population in order to have any kind of tax or fee, and they consider this just another tax. So that hasn't been done again since that happened here, at least in California. But what it did do is it showed us that there were costs that you could calculate. And I'm now involved in a study that we're doing at the behest of the California Department of Public Health to do a really good, careful economic modeling of the cost of tobacco product waste here in California. And we're going to try to implement that in 3 or 4 different communities. Here in San Diego, for sure, probably Santa Cruz, beach communities are, cognizant of the issues, but also in Merced and hopefully maybe even in Yosemite Valley, so that we can actually get a cost estimate which helps to inform policymakers as to the importance of trying to do something about this. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that might mean. But let me just give you this little review. We did a study a few years ago here in San Diego where we used the EPA protocol to determine whether or not something was a hazardous material. And so what this involved, and I apologize to the poor fish who are involved, but it's a live experiment with both saltwater and freshwater fish that was done in a laboratory setting where we soaked cigarette butts in water and made a leachate and at different concentrations, just how many cigarette butts in a liter, in different concentrations. And at the same, and then expose these fish to them over a period of 4 days. And what we found, and you can see the sort of dilutional kind of display there underneath the fish. And what we found is that on this graph, it's a little, unless you're really a nerd like me, what you're seeing there at the number 1 is that that's the number of cigarette butts per liter that kills half the fish. That's the lethal dose 50. So again, we're not in the fields testing this, but what we do know is that this stuff is poisonous. And under something called a precautionary principle, we don't have to know that it's killing people in order to regulate it, because we do a lot of regulation without knowing that it's, killing people. It's precautionary. So anyway, that's a fairly convincing study to me. And so, again, I've talked a little bit about trying to identify these chemicals in the field. We've talked about sublethal effects, meaning things that might happen to DNA and other kinds of bodily processes that could affect growth or, other kind of cytotoxicity. And so we've got a lot of evidence on this to try to help understand it. And there are these pathways that we could imagine, at least, where butts are in the ocean or on the beach or in our storm drains. And this is, a growing issue as well, because we have something called the trash amendment to the Clean Water Act here in California. I know you're probably aware of this, right? Nothing greater than 5 millimeters can go into the storm drains by 2030. That's a butt. Cigarette butts are a lot bigger than that. That doesn't mean, even if we kept all those butts from going in through some sort of full capture mechanism, they are plastic and they break down into microplastics. And this we know about for sure. San Francisco Estuary Institute did a study of urban runoff. And what they found was that there was cellulose acetate in beaucoup quantities in that urban runoff. Now, cellulose acetate is found in other objects, eyeglasses, a film, photographic film, as if we use that anymore, and clothing, rayon is cellulose acetate. But people aren't throwing that onto the ground and squashing it with their feet and getting it into the storm drains very often. I mean, they're throwing that into landfills and stuff, and that doesn't necessarily get into the urban runoff. So it's, there's evidence that we think it's there. And so these areas can be contaminated with the butt waste chemicals, and maybe they can get into humans. We don't know. We'll see. What we do know is that it can be found in drinking water, it can be found in wastewater, it can be found downstream from urban water treatment plants, for instance. So what's being done about cigarette butt waste? Well, cleanups are great, and Mark here and Surf Riders and I Live a Clean San Diego and everybody under the sun, and I myself have been out cleaning up cigarette butts. It's horrible. They're everywhere. I used to have my students go out every year around Earth Day for about an hour, 50 students, 1 hour on the 1 square mile campus of San Diego State University. I give them extra credit, and they would find 20,000 butts in an hour. And by the way, it's no fun dealing with those. I put them in these big tubes out in front of my office, and it just stunk so how. But what that did do is it raised the level of attention, and the campus went smoke-free after about 3 years. Even then, after that happened, the campus, we still got 20,000 butts an hour, even with those restrictions. And by the way, Surf Riders and others have done a great job in trying to get our beaches to go smoke-free. Encinitas has been smoke-free. Solana Beach was the first one in California. And, that helps. It does. It does measurably help. I had some students go out and actually show that it helped before this. State beaches went smoke-free. They compared state and local beaches, and yeah, it helped. But it's not 100%, and it doesn't deal with this stormwater, urban runoff issue at all. It's place-based restrictions, and it helps to denormalize smoking, and it helps to protect us from the secondhand smoke. And I'm going on and on here, but I can't help it. At any rate, we've tried a lot of things, PR campaigns, and this helps. People do respond, although the knowledge about what's in a cigarette butt is pretty limited. Most people, the tobacco industry did a survey that said only 13% of smokers knew that they were made out of plastic. We've done some other more population-based ones, and it's still much less than 30%, I think it was, know that they're plastic. And so there needs to be more of a correction of that information gap to begin with, but that helps. Social media, is one way to do that. So the butt cleanups are important because it raises the level of attention. Banning smoking in outdoor places is important. It denormalizes smoking, and it does help protect some of those areas, at least in some ways. Anti-litter laws don't work. And besides that, think about these sort of what happened with, I can't remember the guy's name, Eric Gardner. Remember Eric Gardner? he was selling loosies, and he was busted for selling loose cigarettes. And when you start thinking about interactions with the police and for this event or to actually enforce that law, you're starting to start making some concern about who are the people that are going to be mostly affected, because again we're dealing a lot more with minority populations, minority neighborhoods. Do we want them to be interacting with the police on something like that? There's got to be a better way than that. Enforcement doesn't work very well, and hardly is ever used. I think there's 165 cases here in California that we were able to find that were enforced. One of them, and can I keep going for a few minutes more? I just got to tell you this story because it's a great story. One of my good friends, who is the chairman of the Department of Epidemiology at an unnamed university, was driving down the Berkeley Pier in his wife's Prius with no ashtray, of course, and he had a cigarillo that he smokes once a year, he tells me. And he flicked it out, and behind him was a Berkeley cop. Busted him. He had to go to court, paid a $500 fine, and a day of community service. He is the poster boy for this, but he's sort of an unusual case. Again, doesn't happen much. I mentioned the litter fees in San Francisco. Some people have advocated for take back and recycling. Well, think about what piles of dirty, filthy, unsanitary, toxic, hazardous butts would require for a take-back and recycling program. The logistics of that are just not feasible. Even though there is an organization called TerraCycle that has been doing this. They are in New Jersey. What a place to be sending your cigarette butts. They ask people to collect these in heavy plastic bags and send them through the mail. I can't see how that is even legal, but apparently it has been done. They process them into some sort of plastic pellets that they use for some sort of building materials. I don't know whether that's safe or whether the chemistry of that warrants them to be even considered as commercial products. So anyway, litter laws aren't enforced. Smoking bans are not all that enforced, to be honest, but they help. Most people don't know about the content of filters and what they're made of. Most smokers admit to freely dumping their cigarettes. Some of them think it's the right thing to do to prevent fires, and that may be in part true, but mostly it is part of this normative behavior on flicking and stomping and flicking and without stomping. And the other thing that is important to understand is that most people think still that filters do some good. And what I want to do is dissuade you of that, because we have 60 years of history with the filter. That's when they started happening, because that was when the Surgeon General's report and the Royal College of Physicians reports implicated cigarettes in terms of the health hazards of smoking. And that's when the filter became this incredibly important thing. In fact, supported by government research and the industry's research was really, really significant. And it's become part of the message that says if you have a filter, which is, the word itself says it's going to get rid of the junk for you, but it doesn't, because the risk of smoking, risks due to smoking have increased over this time, and the incidence, which is the measure of actual cases of adenocarcinoma, has increased, and it has been attributed to the fact that this filter, when you smoke against it, it gets into the periphery of your lungs and causes a more vigorous form of cancer called adenocarcinoma, which is now the dominant cell type as opposed to what it was prior to the filters, which was a different cell type. So anyway, the Surgeon General's report of 2014, as well as the National Cancer Institute report, really made it clear that the filter and the low-tar, low-nicotine cigarettes have not protected anybody's health. Anyway, I'm going to close here, because this gets overwhelming. But what I just want to say is that the filter is a fraud. It's been a fraud throughout this time. There's been a lot of review of the kind of advertising and the sort of messaging that the tobacco industry has done over this time. And it's just important to know that the filter doesn't do a darn bit of good. And it's a plastic hazardous waste product that befiles the environment. And this bill, 1690, is one of the things that people are considering now to help deal with it. I mentioned these data already here, so I won't go through that. And then, and so the question is, what happens when people can't smoke filtered cigarettes? Well, we've actually done a clinical trial where we got a bunch of hardcore smokers together and switched them over, and had them become their own controls. And what we found is that they smoke fewer cigarettes. They don't like unfiltered cigarettes. It's harsher, it's less satisfying. And to me, what that says is, great, if we make it less attractive for people to smoke, maybe we will have some improvement in the number of cigarettes smoked per day. We're still waiting on the biomarkers. We actually tested to see whether or not they were getting more of the carcinogens in from either one, but I don't have those data done yet. But what we do know is that they maintain the same sort of nicotine addiction. The cotinine levels are that. I mentioned the costs, and again, we've done this on 30 large cities around the United States, and we're looking at it very closely here. And so I think that is about all I have to say. But what I want to say is that there's a lot of things that we can do. There's not just one solution to smoking. As a physician, I spent a lot of my days getting people to try to quit smoking or prescribing them medicines that could help them. That's important. These clean air legislation that we have is extremely important because it denormalizes smoking. This effort at trying to get rid of tobacco product waste joins the environmental community with the public health community so that this can be really reinforced as mutually important efforts to try to help prevent tobacco-related diseases, but also prevent the disabling of our environment as a result of tobacco product waste. Thanks for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I hope I haven't overstayed my welcome here. Thank you.
No questions? Dr. Novotny, thank you for your expertise and sharing it with us. And to our public speaker, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you've got a lot of supporters probably in this group. Okay, we're moving on here to approval of the February 10 meeting minutes. I wasn't here, so I'm not going to put a motion forward to approve them. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have approved minutes. We're going to move on to number 7, informational item. So Crystal, I think, is going to lead us in tentative presentation schedule.
Thank you, Ari. Just a second while I bring it up. Is this the right one? No. Okay, so up on the screen is the tentative presentation schedule. We've got the one that we just heard from tonight on tobacco product waste in California. And we've got the future meeting dates here. And if there's any suggestions on presentations, I can take them now.
I just wanted to say something when I introduced the good doctor. If you take a look at all the other things I failed to mention, I knew of but didn't have memorized. So a very distinguished gentleman. Thank you.
I have a question, Crystal, for April 14th. What is Sdcp?
SDCP is San Diego Community Power, and actually the next agenda item will be going over that, so you'll get an earful.
One more question. Would this be the place to request presentations from city staff, or is this a separate type of presentation?
Yeah, I think that can be done here. Yeah.
Okay. I know, Eric, you and we had discussed something about a presentation possibly from the Planning Commission on sort of synergies between the Climate Action Plan and sort of planning, that sort of the planning nexus with the Environmental Commission. So I don't know if that June meeting date might be an option for that.
Yeah, for something that's related to staff, I just have to check with their calendars to see what works for them, but I can float the June 9th. And just perhaps a suggestion, but I could possibly provide you with that presentation. I'll connect with planning to see what makes sense. But typically, I'm the one that coordinates with them to make sure that what they're doing is in alignment with the climate action plan. So, but I'll reach out to planning to see if they have a different perspective and see if maybe we could do a dual presentation with 2 staff members. But I can look into that for you.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
I'm just noticing from the past calendar that April will be a year since we've heard from EDCO. I think there's I can't remember what the schedule is for the expansion of the organics waste program. I know we were talking about it getting ready to go into the commercial side of things, and I think it would be great, at some time a year or after from that last April presentation to hear from EDCO again about how that's going. It seems like it's having a big impact, and it'd be nice to really make sure that we have a public forum to continue to push that information.
Okay, yeah, I can reach out to EDCO and our staff liaison and see if they might be able to come to the April 14th meeting. And yeah, SDCP and SDG&E, if you want to push that off, or I'll mention too that SDCP is presenting to council next week. So if you want to tune into that, and that might kind of give you that presentation interest that you had there, and then you could supplement that with something else if you wanted.
Thanks.
I mean, my feeling is if they're presenting to council, there's not really a reason to make them come here, unless there's a different topic than what they're going to present to council that we're interested in.
Yeah, unless there's something specific that you'd want to hear from them on. Their general topic next week is going to be about the residential rollout. So they'll probably give you an overview of their agency and then specifically discuss the latest plans for rolling out to residential.
Was there a suggestion for the SDG&E presentation? Is that something specific?
That I don't know. Maybe it was.
We had a presentation last time, not really a presentation, but public comment from a gentleman from SDG&E who came, and he's a public outreach individual. I asked him a couple questions because we were talking about tree canopy, and he was a lack of information. So I think we asked him to come back and tell us what their community outreach is for environmental issues. The example was a long time ago, they provided 5 shade trees if you came and learned how to plant a tree, and what kind of outreach are they doing to help for climate action and things like that, I think.
I also know that he was talking about microgrids and possibly introducing that to the city. I actually don't know what microgrids are that he was talking about. I think it's much smaller than what's in the city, or what is used by the city. That's what I mean to say. But I know that was one of the topics that he was talking about, possibly coming to the Environmental Commission before.
Okay, I can reach out to the SDG&E rep if you'd like and see if he'd be interested in giving a presentation.
Yeah, and I would say I don't feel that hearing from EDCO take priority over that. So if that's already been discussed and that makes more sense, April 14th, I'm happy to hear from EDCO later in the year. I just want to get them on the list.
Sounds good.
I am interested in hearing from EDCO, especially because there's been a lot of pushback in my neighborhood of doing the food waste. So I'm really surprised. And so I would like to hear anything that we can push this forward.
Okay. Okay, so I'll reach out to EDCO, SDG&E, and coordinate with planning on a staff presentation related to the nexus of planning and CAP. And then we'll fit it in these next few months where it works with their schedules. If that works for you all.
So one other
Sounds
item that we had talked about was having either Surfrider or maybe JB Timberlake from the Coastal Zone Administrator coming in to talk about the Oceanside groins. It's not firm yet, so I'm not sure what the timing of that would be, but working that offline and we'll try and firm that up. But I think that would be a good thing too.
Okay, I'll add that to the list too. Anything else? Okay, so let's wrap up this item and we'll move to the next one, which is also mine.
Crystal, you have all the items, so you can just roll.
All right, so here, let me bring up my presentation. So the next item is an update on San Diego Community Power. So I thought since many of you are new to the commission, you might not know the history of the city of Encinitas' relationship with San Diego Community Power. So I thought I'd give just a little bit of background. So I'll start with what is community choice energy. So this is a type of agency or program that the state has allowed by statute to operate in our state. And what it is an agency that procures or purchases the power that's used for electricity in our homes and businesses. And it allows kind of a secondary option as an alternative to the IOU or the investor-owned utility. In our case, that's SDG&E. So as you can see by this map on the screen of California, there are several CCAs that have been established across the state. And at this point, around 200 cities, towns, counties, different local jurisdictions have been signed on or are a part of one of these CCAs. So the city of Encinitas is one of these 200 cities, and over 11 million customers are served by CCAs in California. So the CCA, like I said, they purchase that electricity and then it gets delivered over the existing electrical grid, which SDG&E or the other IOU in that territory still manages. And then that's how the customer receives that electricity. So SDG&E still has a job to do. Their responsibility is still the grid, the wires and the poles, and making sure that all of that is maintained. So our CCA is called San Diego Community Power. It was founded by 5 founding members: the city of Chula Vista, Encinitas, Imperial Beach, La Mesa, and San Diego. This was done in 2019. It was done after extensive analysis. There was a feasibility study that was completed. The city of Encinitas led the study for 4 North County cities, and then all the other cities on this list did various levels of feasibility studies themselves as well. So out of those studies, it was determined that it would be feasible to form this type of agency and that it wouldn't be, financially detrimental to the city of Encinitas to do so. So these 5 cities elected to do so and formed a JPA. Most recently, 2 new members have joined. That's the County of San Diego and National City have recently joined. They won't be served power quite yet. It takes about a year to get each of the new members to be able to be serving them power. There's a whole process that has to get approved by the California Public Utility Commission. So they'll be getting their power in about a year. So the core goals of San Diego Community Power are, number 1, to serve their member cities with 100% renewable energy by 2035 or sooner. They also want to offer competitive rates to SDG&E, and then to achieve greenhouse gas reduction goals of the agency and also its member cities. So here's a little more detailed timeline of the formation of Sdcp. Again, it was formed in 2019. A joint powers agreement is what does that. And then very soon after, the agency submits their implementation plan to the CPUC, and that gets the ball rolling on beginning to procure that power or setting the stage to procure that power. Another major thing that needs to happen, there's a whole startup process. It takes about a year or so. That all happened in 2020. The main thing that happens there is acquiring a startup loan. SDCP needed a loan of $35 million to get started. And then part of that loan is used to hire consultants and staff and have them be working while you're not actually purchasing the power and receiving those customer bills. And then a big chunk of that money is also used to actually purchase the power in advance. So if you can imagine, the agency has to purchase the power about a month in advance. They then serve it to the customers, and then a month later, all those customers pay their bills. So that lag time is what that money is needed for, is to kind of pay for that upfront. It's almost like it's a loan, basically. Okay, and then in 2021, SDCP actually began their service. They started with serving power to municipal customers. That was last March. And then last June, they began serving commercial customers. So kind of 2 of the 3 customer classes are already being served. And then also in 2021 was when Encinitas elected to have our base rate be SDCP's Power 100 rate. They have 2 rates. Power 100 is their rate that is 100% renewable energy. And then their Power On rate is 50% renewable rate. So all the other member cities, the base rate for customers that you're offered is Power On, but for Encinitas, we elected to offer our customers starting at that higher, more green rate, I guess you could say.
Can I ask a clarifying? So
Sure.
if you were a municipal or commercial, SDG&E customer in Encinitas, once, when this was launched, your default became Power 100 and you would have had to opt to the less green version.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's how it works. Yep.
Do we have numbers on that? Do we know, how many?
There are numbers on that. I don't have them at the moment, but I can get those for you if you'd like. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
SDCP has those numbers. Yeah. And then the final phase, which is happening right now in 2022, is the roll-in of the residential customers and then also the net energy metering customers. So those are any customers that have solar on their building. And then SDCP is also beginning to think about their customer programs. So things like offering incentives for energy efficiency measures and things like that. So here's an example of what SDCP rates look like. Just a note at the top that SDCP rates are aligned with the structure that SDG&E retains for their rates. So for example, there's different rates for different classes. They have a whole set of rates, whether you're a commercial customer or residential customer. There's time of use rates, there's standard meter rates. There's probably 30 or 40 different rate classes. So SDCP aligns their rates with SDG&E, so it makes sense for the customer when you're kind of trying to compare your bill. And so here's 2 examples of what Power On versus Power 100 would look like in terms of a cost. I think this is a residential example. And the main difference is really when you go down and look at this SDCP electric generation. If you're on Power On, you would be paying about $22 to SDCP for that 50% renewable rate. And then for Power 100, it's a couple dollars more to be getting that premium product. But everything else on the bill is the same. So you still pay for your SDG&E delivery, and you still pay any fees that go to SDG&E. That's all the same across the board, and that all still goes to SDG&E. And then here's what residents should be seeing in their mail. Over the last couple months, 3 mailers are required. This is actually a state requirement that you notify customers 3 separate times that this changeover is happening. Again, it's an opt-in. It's an automatic opt-in. So customers, they don't have to do a thing, and they get opted into this program. However, if they would like to opt out or opt down, they can simply call SDCP and request that, and that change will be made. So there's 3 times they get notified via mail with a variety of mailers. And then there's also some marketing, like they of course have a website and they do social media marketing and whatnot. And then just lastly, a reminder that they are in the final phase of launch. It's for NEM that started in February, and the opt-in happens monthly on a rolling basis based on the true-up month of the NEM customer. So how NEM works is right now with SDG&E, annually they do a true-up, which means that the amount of energy that you generated versus pulled from the grid. Oh shoot, what did I do? Hold on, sorry. Okay, there. They do an annual analysis of what your energy generation was from your solar and your energy use was from the grid. And if you're over or under, there's a true up where you either have to pay SDG&E for that extra, or they don't really pay you. But if you owe them, then you have to pay up. So on that month is when you're going to get opted into SDCP. And then in April, so we're in March now, so April 1st is when Encinitas residents will get automatically rolled into SDCP. So you don't have to do anything, it'll just happen. And then on the left here is just a graphic comparing the NEM program, the two different NEM programs, SDCPs and SDG&E. And kind of I'll just highlight the couple of differences. So for SDCP, just a reminder that you get either that 50% base rate or 100% if you opt up to Power 100 when you're pulling from the grid. So most of your power during the day comes from your solar panels, but if you do need to pull power in the evening, then you get a higher percentage of renewable compared to SDG&E, which is only 31%. And then the other main benefit from SDCP is that when you do that true up, they'll be doing it on a monthly basis, so it makes a little more sense for a customer when they're looking at their bill. It's not this annual lump sum that they have to pay. It's actually occurs on a monthly basis, so it makes a little more sense in terms of their cash flow. And then SDCP's rate actually offers a premium return on payment if they are generating more than what they're actually using. They actually get a small amount back on their bill, which is not available through SDG&E. And that wraps up my presentation.
Thanks. Thank you, Crystal. That was a really excellent presentation. I love your graphics too. That's cool.
I'll thank SDCP. I stole them.
Really well presentation of that information. I have a couple of questions. The first is sort of like a more big picture. So do we actually have the infrastructure available to generate renewable energy to supply 100% renewable or Power 100 to every Encinitas resident that opts into it or declines to opt out of it?
Yeah, it is available, and what SDCP does is they seek that in the electricity market. So it's not necessarily here in Encinitas, it's out, where it's generated. Typically the solar or wind farms are more on the inland areas of our state. Sometimes they're out of state, but usually they're in state. But yeah, it is available, and SDCP, the way that their purchasing works, they wouldn't have been able to allow Encinitas to have that option unless they could serve it. So, and they have all of the accounting to demonstrate that that amount of renewable energy is being purchased for the Encinitas customers.
Thank you. And I just have one last question, more kind of a personal note. But we, have solar panels in our home, and I don't believe have received any information from SDCP at this stage. So does that mean that it's not our time to true up yet, I guess, and we'll just sort of wait to be contacted, or?
It might be. I'm not exactly sure how they're doing the mailers for NEM, whether they're waiting for your true-up month or if they did it a while ago. Let me check with SDCP staff on that and see when you should have received your mailers as a NEM customer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Crystal. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first is talking about NEM. We have solar panels, and I was wondering about the credit charges provided monthly. And so how it is with us now is that we will have credits in July, and that will be offset by our use in December. And what I've heard is that there will be no carryover of the credits in the cycle. And with this cycle, it would be monthly. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well. I think to get a little bit more specific information, I'd have to refer you to Sdcp. They have a great customer service line that could answer your question in more detail, but that is how I understand it, that they're doing that balancing every month now instead of annually. So, yeah, that may mean that, in the months that you use more electricity, you're paying, and then in the months that you don't, there's a credit, but I'm not exactly
Yeah, but the
sure.
credit
Yeah.
is not much.
Yeah. So yeah, I would encourage you to reach out to their customer service. If you go on their website, which I posted here, they have a really easy, customer service line. It's answered by a live person, and they'd be happy to answer your question.
Okay, thanks. I also want to say, first of all, I want to say that I'm a huge supporter, and I'm really happy that Encinitas is getting the 100% renewable energy default. So thank you so much for that. I have seen some silly naysayers on Facebook. And one of the questions that I wanted to find out about was that they were saying that like the city council people that were on the San Diego Community Power Board were getting compensated. And that's the reason why we have it. And so I was wondering, are the city council people that are on the board, are they getting compensated?
No, they don't get even a salary for showing up. They're volunteering. They're serving as volunteers on the board. They don't get paid.
Good. Thank you for that. So that I can tell them no.
Any other questions? Okay, well, pass it back to Ari. Commissioner Novi.
I'm going to pass it right back to you for the.
There's
next.
another.
We have, well, let's see, I'll be official about it. So the next item here is, we're into action items, 8 on the agenda, and A is Environmental Commission Work Plan. Back to you, Crystal.
All right, thank you. All right, so, is the work plan not linked here? Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, so here is the Environmental Commission work plan for 2021-22. And I'll just go through just the status tracking items that were added since the last month. So under community outreach, just a couple of events to let you know about. Actually, there's a date change for this first one. So the Ecofest volunteer kickoff event, that is going to happen in April. Actually, Commissioner O'Connor, do you know the exact date? I'm sorry, I don't have this offhand. It just changed like today. I could look it up too. Sorry, guys.
I show it April 24th, Sunday, April 24th.
Yep, I just found it too. April 24th, sorry about that, at Cottonwood Creek Park from 3 to 5 p.m. And then Encinitas Arbor Day will be Saturday, April 30th, also at Cottonwood Creek from 9 to noon. And then moving down the list, under Community Choice Energy, San Diego Community Power will begin their operations for residential customers beginning April 1st. That was what we just discussed. And then one minor update to CAP implementation. Kind of the latest thing that we've completed as staff is Ordinance 2113. It was adopted by Council on October 27th, 2021. The last thing that needs to be done on that before we are able to implement is the California Energy Commission needs to approve our REACH code, the ordinance. And we're anticipating that that's going to happen on their April 13th board meeting, or business meeting, they call it. And so as soon as that happens, then the ordinance will become effective. And then under item 14 on regarding plastic pollution, on February 9th, City Council adopted Ordinance 2022-01, the balloon ordinance. I think we mentioned that last time too. And that's it. Anything to discuss on this item?
I'll just say I'm glad to see we have so many commissioners participating on each of the items. I think this is the first time in a long time where we're not like blank on anything. So thanks everybody for chipping in and getting on there. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we can move on to action item 8B, Community Grant Program Evaluation Panel. So don't everybody volunteer all at once to be on the panel.
Oh, sorry, Ari, before we move on,
Oh, we have to approve this, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I get a motion to, or I'll make a motion to approve the updated work plan. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes. All right, now, everybody try not all at the same time to apply, volunteer for the wonderful Community Grant Program Evaluation Panel. It lifts your spirits to see all the great work happening out in the community.
What is the
I'm trying to pre-sell this.
volunteer job that we're applying for?
I'm sure there's a presentation, but essentially, we'd like to have one environmental commissioner per year that serves on the Community Grant Program Evaluation Panel. So the city has a little chunk of money to give out to primarily nonprofits, and gets quite a few applications per year, and there's a panel that's set up to evaluate and prioritize.
And who's on the panel?
I don't know what other commissions are represented on the panel. It's, I think, at least 3 people, right?
There's
on
a
our screen,
representative
okay.
from each commission.
All right, well, yeah, I'm jumping the gun here. Why don't you guys take it over?
I thought you were doing great.
I'll volunteer.
oh, there we go.
This commission is so efficient. Thank you. Hold on, we have to formally appoint you, Carol. I'll make a motion for Carol to be the Environmental Commission representative on the Community Grant Program Evaluation Panel. Can I get a second?
I'll heartily second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. Thank you, Carol. Okay, do we have any commissionators? Oh, wow, that'd be awesome if we were commissionators. Okay, do we have any commissioner-initiated agenda items? Doesn't look like it. Any updates? Anybody have any updates of interest? All right, anybody want?
Commission Secretary Meadow has one item of interest that is somewhat controversial. Daylight savings time, believe it or not, happens Sunday, 2 a.m. Don't forget to spring forward or you're going to be 1 hour late on Monday. Thank you.
I'm all for it because it's an excuse to be grumpy one day of the year. Otherwise, there's no good excuses for being grumpy. Okay, thanks, Chamomile. Would anybody, number 11 here, would anybody like to put a commissioner-initiated agenda item onto the future agenda?
I'd like to have some discussion to see, based on our public speaker and our expert on tobacco waste, to put something on. I think the movement to do something with that AB 1690 is out there, and it needs push from citizens and cities, and I would love to have a discussion about a potential resolution in support of that measure that's up at the state level.
I think that's a great idea. I think it was a compelling presentation today, and I hope this is not. We have a lot of new members, so I'm always happy, and I know Crystal and Eric are happy to help us move forward. So typically, the best way to move forward for showing official support to a state legislative item would be to propose a resolution to the city council, that the city is officially in favor of it. And so, as fast as somebody can potentially be ready to bring draft language for that, to a commission meeting, it can be considered and move forward.
I'd like to take on that task of creating that document.
Fantastic. I'd say I don't think we need anything as formal as a subcommittee or anything like that for that, so we'll leave it in your capable hands. And I think I'll be very excited and interested about that for next month.
And I believe I also put it into the legislative platform, so I don't know if it ended up there or not in something that the city would recognize to be able to, on its own, create letters in support to. But I sent a document in online for that to be looked at anyway.
That's good. And if you haven't done this kind of thing before, I think, Crystal or Eric, depending on when your baton passing officially happens, we have really good templates for exactly this kind of thing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else want to take something on?
Yeah, I have one update. So in the last meeting, I had raised the issue of that Oceanside City Council had voted to do a study on building groins for soil or sand erosion, and that the Carlsbad City Council had voted to a resolution to oppose that. Since then, in February 22nd and 23rd, Del Mar and Solana Beach City Councils have followed up with similar resolutions. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working to try and get someone to come in and do a presentation for us, just to give us some background, and maybe we can consider similar actions in the future. So.
Sounds great. And I'll just remind everybody, while we have the option to specifically state now that we would like something on the agenda for next month, we also, that option continues up until the day the agenda is finalized for public. So no reason to put something on now if it's not ready. But I think it's especially good to talk about it here, and we can always figure that out. Awesome. All good stuff. Anything else? This is always a good time to talk about future issues.
Oh, what's going on with the native plant presentation?
Do we have a schedule? I know there were 3 potential dates.
They ended up landing on March 31st, which unfortunately I think a number of you won't be able to attend from the kind of polling that we did. Pulling together multiple commissions and multiple groups, and it seems like it landed right around Encinitas Unified School District's spring break, but they had to get a date set up. It will be recorded, so you'll be able to see or hear the recording after the meeting. So if you are unable to attend, that's fine. It's not a mandatory meeting. It won't be a strike against you in terms of an absence or anything like that. But if you can attend, the date that's set right now is March 31st. And there'll be an agenda going out. We'll keep you guys apprised, all of you apprised on how that evolves. But that's the date.
What time?
I believe it's 6 o'clock.
And then did we vacate our meeting that month? To do that? Okay, no, it's just an additional.
We already did that
Oh,
in January.
You're here right now.
I think, it sounds like we've got, some good items coming up for the agenda next month, so I don't see a reason to consider not having a meeting. Of course, if the agenda ends up super light, that's always something we can consider. Okay, great. Anything else? All right, let's adjourn. Thank you all.